Today, I'm showing you how to turn samples into synths, and I'm making this video for a few reasons. First of all, because I love doing this, and I do it a lot, and I've showed what I'm about to show you in bits and pieces in previous videos, but I wanted to do a dedicated video where all of this stuff is all in one place to either give you a basic primer on how to do this, and in doing so, a basic introduction to subtractive synthesis. I'll get to what that is in a second if you're not familiar with it. Or if you are a bit more of an experienced hardware/synth user, this will hopefully at least get the gears in your head turning. So why would you want to do this? Let's say, for instance, that you have a groovebox like the MPC One, which I'm going to be using for demonstration because it's got a very nice visual interface that I love using to demonstrate this stuff. If you've maxed out your plugin usage but still want some sounds that you really need to shape to your own specifications, the stuff I'm going to show you can help you do that. Or if you don't want to pay for the paid plugins, you can get a lot of the way there with what I'm about to show you. Or let's say that you're using a device that just doesn't have a built-in synth engine at all, but does have things like filters and effects. This is going to be your go-to. Things like the Digitact or the Polyend Tracker. All that being said, let's jump into it. So the samples that we're going to be using as demonstration are two samples from my Roland J06A, and I'm just going to put those linked in the description for free to download, no download gates or anything like that. And if you like those, there are more where those came from my $5 key group program pack, linked also in the description. $5 gets you a bunch of multi-sampled synth patches from a bunch of my hardware synths back there, and those are available as key group programs that you can load straight into your MPC, or as just WAV files that you can load into literally whatever. Regardless, these two you can get for free. So I'm going to start things off with this bass. And in this case, you can either hit this button to immediately turn this into a key group program, which is quite handy, or you can just manually create a key group program from scratch. I'm going to do that in this case. So there's our sound. I'm going to immediately set this to one shot. So it rings out. I'm going to set this all the way to mono. And I've set my scale here to be like somewhere near the original sample. So we've got our sample. This is on C1. And that is set to just ring out for as long as the sample lasts. First off, let's make the sound less static. So I'm going to go to Portamento and turn that up, also known as glide. Now, the Portamento on the MPCs sounds a little bit derpy and a little bit off, but you can hear that it brings it to life a little bit, makes it sound less static. But with that being said, let's go into my favorite tool by far for shaping sounds, filters. So if you're not familiar with the concept of subtractive synthesis, the basic idea is that you take a complex waveform and then start carving away at it, like carving a statue. And that's what we're going to be doing here. And filters are going to be the main way that you do that. And this is definitely the most common form of synthesis, the kind of introduction to synthesis that a lot of people get. And this is a bit of a sneaky introduction to that in this video as well. So let me zoom this in. So in this case, we're going to start off with a low pass filter, also known as a high cut filter. I'm going to use this envelope to bring that down. And I have to turn up the depth and turn down the cutoff. And then we get a filter sweep. So that's too fast. So if you do it this low, you get a pluck. We can try different filters. This is a little more laid back. Let's go back to that intense one, and let's crank our resonance. And we got acid. And that is a bit much, maybe, but we've immediately transformed the sound. Or maybe we turn up our attack. Turn it up quite a bit. Turn up hold a little bit so that stays on that highest point. But let's take this even farther. Let's get some effects on here. I'm going to get back to LFOs in a second, by the way. Let's go on harmonic and just immediately chuck some distortion on here. Make that stereo. And dial that into taste. So that doesn't sound great. I don't love the distortion in this, but it can be useful. See, that thickens up the sound pretty nicely. Or we could do something like a chorus. Let's just do a 2 voice. Which is quite nice. That can cause some phase issues, so approach with caution. Or one of my favorite effects, and I'm going to show this on the higher sound as well, is a granulator, specifically pitched up an octave and reversed. And that's how you make things sound like space. And that's probably a little much in the mix. That sounds quite dramatic. And then we could top this off with some reverb if we wanted to. I'm going to get rid of the effects for now and dial back my filter envelope. And let's turn the cutoff up a little bit, turn the resonance up a bit further so you can hear the effect very clearly of what I'm about to do. Let's go into our LFO next. And I'm going to choose a square. Nothing's happening right now because we haven't assigned this LFO to anything. I also want to sync this to, say, 8th notes. So I'm going to turn up the depth on this filter. And this is going to start moving the filter around in jumps. There we go. So I'm going to turn this down a little bit. And you can get some pretty cool effects with this. Maybe we also go in and reverse this and like bring this. You can get creative with this. I should also mention on the MPC specifically, you can layer multiple samples, which is hugely powerful. So I'm going to layer 2 instances of the same sample. Let's get rid of our LFO action for now. And for this second layer, I'm just going to crank this an octave 2 so you can really hear the effect. And so you can build up pretty complex sounds, and you can even do stuff like pan them around or change their level relative to each other. And this gets even more powerful if you say, start layering completely different samples together, and then they all get sent through the filter. So it makes them sound a lot more unified, and then you stack effects on top of that. And once you're done, you can have a completely unrecognizable sound from the samples that were the foundation for it. So here's an example of all of that in the context of an actual song. An octave down version. This is why I like this process so much. It allows you to be kind of nimble and think on your feet and just use what you have to get the sounds that you want, and it can lead to a whole greater than the sum of its parts. And it's just a very particular form of creativity of taking existing stuff and then flipping it into something unrecognizable that I really enjoy, and that's why I wanted to like make this dedicated video showing it to you. Let's make another key group program here, and let's bring in that higher sample. I've made a new key group program. And I could say just leave this polyphonic, put that on one shot. That's choking a little bit, but hopefully you see where I'm headed with this. I'm gonna set this to note on, and then just set the release for the amp to be a little longer. Or we could send this to chords, maybe. Let's go back to notes for now. And let's go back to program edit. So once again, engage the filter, turn up our depth, turn down our cutoff. I really like low pass filters, if you couldn't tell. Well, let's actually just do future bass chords real quick, because we can. Or kind of like old school future bass, I suppose. So I'm gonna turn this up and then turn down our release a bit. Let me turn that release back up. We can make an ARP. Or if I hold this down, let's go up an octave. So you can take this pretty far. And then, once again, let's stack some effects. Maybe this time, let's go for ensemble. This will definitely cause some phase issues, so use with caution. And high-pitched shimmery parts can also really benefit from a bit of auto pan. Let's just do auto pan sync and turn up the rate to something pretty quick. So something like an ARP bouncing around in your headphones. Or if I turn this back to normal notes and go back to program edit and adjust our filters a bit. It adds this lovely shimmer that just makes everything sound much more cinematic, kind of Blade Runner-y. Or we can go in once again and add granulator, because I promised I would show you this on a higher pitched sample. And that's already pretty nice, not pitched up. Especially when paired with a nice reverb. But let's go a little more restrained on the feedback. Or here's a different device that is actually surprisingly good for turning samples into synths, the Roland MC101. And this also applies to the Roland MC707. So I've got this bass sample loaded in here. And one thing that this has is vibrato. So I'm going to turn up the vibrato rate. I'm going to turn up the vibrato depth. Just make it really intense. That sounds kind of ridiculous, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to turn up the vibrato delay. So it'll take a little bit for it to kick in. So it'll start off kind of straight ahead and then gain vibrato over time. Maybe this is not a great sample to demonstrate this with, but hopefully you can see once again how for like a higher pitched kind of lead sound, that could really bring it to life. Pair that with some glide, and the listener might never have guessed that that sound was originally just a static sample. And of course, there's also stuff like granular and wavetable synthesis, which also work fundamentally off of samples. Wavetable synthesis has had a big resurgence with the popularity of software synths like Serum, which it does really well, and so you can absolutely transform samples as a really good starting point into completely different sounds. Or a recent hardware synth that lets you do custom wavetables, which is what I really care about, is the Arturia Microfreak. And on the does both front, both granular and wavetable, there's Arturia Pigments. And the Polyend Tracker. I did a dedicated video showing it in action as both a granular and wavetable synth, and used a bunch of the techniques that I showed in this video. So if you'd like to see that, you can check that out up over here. And if you'd like to see all these techniques applied on the MPC One to make an actual song, you can check this video out over here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with a new video in a little bit.